A full week of 12 and 12 moves along. I'm Bobby Broyles, and he is Tim McDonald, as we continue our preview series with the Rams of Rhode Island. Difficult season a year ago, but at times we did see this program make some progress, and you have to think they will turn those positives into consistency in 2017.
Exactly right, and it's easy to, first of all, immediately look at that 2-9 record, and when we talk about those tiny positives that can add up with, that's how you add up that consistency that we're looking for when we talk about Rhode Island. I mean, first 4 games last year, I mean, not an excuse, but not an easy task either. At Kansas, versus Albany, at Harvard, and then at home versus New Hampshire. Again, if you take positives, responded from that tough UNH loss, in a game that I was at, Mike was at, that was a closer game than the score indicated, but regardless, the respond from that with a rivalry win over Brown, a healthy Harold Cooper, at times, makes all the difference and continued to throughout the year. In both wins that Rhodey had last season, he rushed for career highs of 133 and 155 yards. And obviously, just pointing out those key games that Harold Cooper had, it's easy to point those out and say, look how well he played. Yep. But it's that consistency and, of course, keeping him healthy is also a huge key moving forward in 2017. Close losses to Stony Brook. Remember, that's a 14-3 loss. And Maine, 21-28. In all, this team ended better than it started. You look at that win, snapped a 23-game road losing streak, just to give you some perspective, with a victory at Elon. And that was, again, almost felt like that was a win that this team needed and deserved and got it, followed by that heartbreaking last-second loss on the field goal versus Towson. What was that, a 50-plus yarder? But to end the game. But having a back like Harold Cooper can make the difference with the struggles on offense. And there's some questions that need to be answered. Don't get us wrong. But banged up a little bit was Cooper last year. Started 6 games. Him and TJ Anderson are both back. They both finished with just over 400 yards on the ground. And half of the team's touchdowns on the ground as well last season. Cooper's risk, as we see, also relates to keeping him back there as a kick returner. 25.3 average per return with 607 yards shows you the danger. Also had 2 touchdowns, but at the same time, keeping him healthy and consistent, that also relates to that position. QB suddenly has gone to a wide open competition. We see transfers Tyler Harris from UCF and Jajuan Lawson from New Mexico. Both of them came in right away, already practicing with the team. Oh yeah, they're also already eligible. Other 2 QBs on the roster right now, on Rhode Island's roster, have not played a snap yet, so we do not know really what to expect. Wideouts like Kyrie Denny, Aaron Parker, Harold Buckner, all of them are back. That's great. Aaron Parker had 4 touchdowns last year. That's great, but like many times, the flow and success could relate to that go-to premier guy on offense, and right now that's Harold Cooper.
Of course, at Media Day, we talked to Coach Fleming about his senior running back, Harold Cooper. Take a listen.
Well, I think Harold can be has got the ability on our football team to be able to take it the distance. He's done that in the return game quite a bit. And, he had a couple of significant big hitters last year. A couple of them were called back. But at the same time, he has the ability, if he can get into that third level, and they're not in the proper angle, he can take that away and he can finish the run. Really excited about trying to present him with the type of senior year that he has earned. Last year was an injury-riddled season for him. Got going into into his groove about mid-season and had some decent performances. But really looking forward to trying to send him out as a winner, number one, and a big season in terms of numbers, because I know he's been chasing that 1,000-yard mark, and I'd love to be able to see him do that and try to get him 500 and more catching it. So he's a significant part, and he can change the game, and we'll utilize different ways to make that happen.
Defensively, this team brings back 10 starters from a unit that does have experience, especially up front.
Especially up front, indeed. And when you think of Rhodey in the past years, we've talked about, well, they need to replace this at defense and bring back these starters. But 10 guys back, look at guys like Abdul, Rahman Ibrahim, Mike Azarike, and Jose Duncan. First 2 I mentioned are now in their 5th fall camp with the Rams. So this isn't nothing new for them. They've been through the gauntlet, been through this system before. Duncan made All-CAA 3rd team in 2016. Azarike made the same squad, but that was back in 2015. Need to lean on their leadership. I think they can provide that if you start with improvement for the defense, if you start with where can it begin. 11th in rush D last season, 9th in pass D, last in total D, but you have to believe with 10 starters back, the room for improvement is that much better. You saw some position changes as well from spring ball to now fall camp. Tez Wilson had 8 tackles for loss last year in 11 games at linebacker. Now he's a defensive lineman. Nas Jones also was a safety. Could move to linebacker. We might see that. 66 tackles last year as the starting safety in 2016. Whatever the case is, if Rhodey improves or adjusts on defense, I don't think it's going to be night and day. It's not going to be something that you just flip a switch with the unit. Looking for answers sometimes if you find ways to shake things up. I think that can make the difference. It might be small, but I think that is the first step that Rhody should take on defense.
Here is Coach Fleming again, this time on his expectations for the defense.
I think we've got 8 defensive linemen that I think we can rotate in all at different levels of experience and talent. But, I think it can be a very stalwart group, a tough group that we can rotate, keep fresh people in there. The 2 name recognitions that most people, would identify would be Mike Azrique, who we brought today, who was a 3rd-team selection 2 years ago, had a tough year last year, and then Jose Duncan, who I believe was a 3rd-teamer last year. Those are the recognizable names, but there's a host of young guys that can really make an impact. Brandon Giannetti is a true sophomore defensive tackle that's really put on some girth, and I'm really interested in see what he can do. Monty Sinise, Tez Wilson, a guy that played linebacker for us, so we moved down to defensive end where, he gotten himself up to 230, 235. He's the kind of guy that you really like to see put some heat on the quarterback. So there's a talented group there. Linebacker, I think we've got a solid group of kids that will have some knockback, a couple of new players coming I'm excited about. And then we've got a wealth of experience in the secondary, which is always comforting, because that's when the last stop before the bus stop is that over the top ball. And I think we've got 4 good corners and we've got 5 safeties that I think we can get on the field and help us both defensively and on special teams.
Tim, we saw small improvements at different times for this team last season. So where do you look right away in order to progress further in 2017?
I think all those smaller aspects we keep talking about or mentioning, not just playing close and saying, man, Rhody was in that game late, and Rhody was not just playing close and not just being happy or okay with playing close. And I don't think Rhody expects that, but I also think it's hard to get over that hump. In the UNH game, the main game, the Stony Brook game, even that Towson game and how the season ended, if Rhody wins that game, we're probably starting with that, talking about, well, they turn the ship around in the latter half of the season, but that's the difference between turning the page, hands down. He's finding a way to overcome that mentality. The schedule opens up at FBS foe Central Michigan. Then you have 2 home games versus Stony Brook and Harvard. And easy to say that keeping Harold Cooper is healthy leads to good things, and everything's going to be great on offense, but it's also going to take some steadiness and some answers under center, which, again, we don't know right now who that person is going to be. A 3-game stretch at New Hampshire, at Brown, followed with a bye week, then at Maine, and all of a sudden the early portion becomes very important and critical if Rhody wants to start turning things around. Establish offensive keys, then buckle up for a back end that features UAlbany on the road, JMU and Nova at home, and Towson on the road to end things. Again, just to wrap up Rhody, I think it's that mentality for me of not just being okay with playing in those close games, not just be okay with ending the season with 2 wins. And I don't think Rhody has done that or displayed that attitude, but I think that for me is how you overcome it if you are the Rams heading into a new year.
The Rams opened their 2017 season on the road at Central Michigan on Thursday night, August the 31st at 7 p.m. on ESPN3 and the Watch ESPN app.
And also you can check out CAAfootball.com and our social media pages as we go one-on-one with Harold Cooper. We've talked about him a lot today.
Yes, we have.
For the latest CAA football featured, and these have been by far some of our favorite segments so far, so trust us when we say you don't want to miss it.
Tim and I close the week on Friday previewing the Richmond Spiders, where we'll hear from their new head coach, Russ Huesman. Until then, we'll see you back here tomorrow.